Hello, Marcus Tenlow here from Meanjin. Now, this afternoon I created a list very thoughtfully of some of the most significant moments in my life. Now, there's a couple of rules to that. One is that I kind of favored those which were fairly recent. So in my last 10, 20 years especially. Now, the original prompt from a social media post was the most beautiful moment in your life. And honestly, I couldn't think of such a moment because, and I realized as I thought about this more, that the most beautiful moments in my life are not really beautiful. They are ironic, subtle, they have irony. That's what I said. They're often very awkward and they don't seem to make much sense at the time. And for some reason, these appeal to me a lot more than those really beautiful moments, like, for example, your first kiss, or maybe the Cameraders won, or maybe you got married. None of this stuff is relevant to my own life. I'm going to start off with a couple of minutes where I spent in Coles, and it was actually longer than that. It was Coles in Canberra, in Woden ACT, and I was in the heat of my mental health authority engagements. So I was engaged with a very hostile, malevolent authority who would punish me if I didn't take their drugs, right? So one day I did this walk out into the Woden Coles, and I stood underneath their large UFO camera. Now, these aren't very common anymore in 2025, but back in the day, might have been 2006, 8 or something like that. Back in the day, these were like a dome, right? Like a hemisphere, if you like. And they were like a dome-shaped black thing with a camera inside, so they could see you, but you couldn't see the camera. So I stood underneath that dome for as long as I could, just to see how long I could stand there. Didn't move very much, like I might have twiddled a few fingers or even stood on one leg. But I knew eventually that someone would pick up on what I was doing and come and maybe accost me and tell me to fuck off or something. But no, I can't remember exactly how I was pulled away from the scene, but I think I definitely remember like an Italian kind of man who didn't speak very good English. They probably chose him for the job. And he said to me like something like, are you here to buy something? And then I told him all the things that I wanted to buy, one by one. And he actually escorted me around the supermarket and made sure that I got what I wanted, and then pretty much escorted me to the cash register and out of the shop. But the checkout assistant, this very thin, frail guy, was shaking like a leaf, and he was extremely nervous because he knew what was happening, that he thought that I was really mad. Now, I don't remember exactly what I bought, but I remember getting some things which I didn't really want. And I don't know whether I actually bought them in the end. But one of the things that I said to this checkout assistant was, are these foods all okay to eat? And he kind of said, yeah. He was like incredulous, but he said, yeah, under his breath. Now, I'm sure as much as anything that guy remembers exactly what happened on that day. Like it's a memory that will stay with him for the rest of his life, if he's still alive. These sort of things don't leave you when you see something or experience and have to engage with a mad person like that. He will remember that when he gets old. Now, another event that occurred when I was in the Mental Health Authority's gaze, when I was selling The Big Issue. This may have been 2010, 11, no, probably 11 or 12. And I was selling in a part of Woden Plaza or near to there. Then I walked, and then I was approached by maybe my case manager for mental health, and I think I managed to walk away. Now, I walked a long way, and I exited the kind of central zone of Woden and walked across highways and grassy areas like this huge circle, this huge roundabout, and eventually landed up a few hundred meters away, walking all the way to a stadium where there was a game being played. It was AFL. And it was open, so you didn't have to pay for going in. A lot of people gathered there. It may have been a local match or something. But all the way walking there, I was actually pursued or pursued in a certain way by the police. So they called the police. They got the police, like several vehicles and obviously all the people inside them, to follow me and chase me and find a reasonable place to capture me. And I eventually got into the stadium, was standing among hundreds and thousands of people watching this game. Now, I had the option at one stage to actually go onto the field while they were playing. But honestly, to this day, I regret not being brave enough to do that. So the police came in, they stood around for a while. They might have just looked around, made sure everything was kind of okay. And then they came up close to me and took me. And I struggled and screamed and everything, and resisted as much as I could. So they got me into their van, and eventually I, went on my way to hospital. Now that was pretty damn huge because it was the biggest moment where hundreds of people were watching me get arrested and suffer like under the police. So maybe I brought attention to people's attention to civil rights and the violations that police do all the time. Okay, let's go to 2006. So that was the next year after I was first arrested and brought to mental hospital. I escaped to Sydney and was enrolled in drama school. It was AADA, Australian Academy of Dramatic Art, in Surrey Hills, which is quite a inner suburb of Sydney. Now, long story is that I didn't have a crush on a girl, right? What happened was she was the only one who was kind to me on the first day. And she asked me whether I was interested in taking up residence at her shared place, a shared accommodation. And I was kind of touched by that, and I kind of liked her. But to say that I was in love with her is not quite accurate. Anyway, I kind of did a lot of secretive things to give her hints and stuff, and no one really knew what I was doing. I didn't know myself, right? I asked, and a couple of occasions I gave myself enough courage to ask her whether she would accept me, and this was many months after the first day at school, right? And first day you're much more easygoing, but once you learn what sort of an arsehole I was and what sort of a outsider I was, she was obviously very resistant to me coming into her apartment. But anyway, there's this guy named Hudson in my group who I know was kind of like the protagonist in making people do things and contrive things. So he must have been the one who encouraged this girl, to, after she quit drama school, and she actually turned up a few months later in an improvisation class, and she was sitting at one corner of the wall, and kind of like people were like said that she was there, but I guess they expected me to be really surprised, and fortunately for me, I guess I wasn't that surprised. I contained my emotions, but it was kind of surreal seeing her again and just against the wall there, and I accepted that surreal realization which they wanted me to feel, because they were kind of luring me into a reaction, and on the suspicion that I had been secretive and giving hints to her over the last few months. Anyway, the drama class went on, improv went on, and not much happened. I said a few dumb things as I normally do. Wasn't a very good conversationalist back in 2006, and But it was an interesting setup, and I still remember that. So a lot of this stuff is classified information, which you're getting anyway. I had a podiatrist in Brisbane City, Meanjin City, and she was nice. She was quite attractive, and I was conversational enough, and was very honest with her and told her stories about my life, which interested her quite a lot. But one thing I appreciate about people like that is when you complain about something, they will be sympathetic to that. Like, you don't have to complain too much, and they will still listen and respect that and do something about it. And that's why I respected this person so much, this podiatrist who clipped my toenails and stuff. So it came to a head, and there was kind of some kind of frisson, if you like, romantic attraction. I don't know. Hard to qualify it as that. But there was some kind of crush there. And I still remember her trying to contain that because she's a professional. And I was like this mentally disabled person, allegedly. And she was still very enthused by me and pretended and tried very hard to control. And I thought that was really beautiful because I'd never impressed someone like that so authentically and beautifully. So I remember her just trying to pretend to not be too enthusiastic, and I remember at one stage she took a vacuum cleaner out and just used it to distract herself and vacuum clean the floor. But yeah, soon after that, we had our relationship, our professional, podiatrist-client relationship ended because of just the rules that I wasn't allowed to get NDIS funding for that. But yeah, honestly, my erotic imagination is so powerful that I actually use her as some kind of imaginative prop, if you like. I don't know if that's the word. For imagining my sexual dreams and stuff. Take it as you will. You may not like that, but it's the truth. Like years later, I still think about her. Then there was another girl, right? I can call them a girl, I guess. If you want to call them lady or something, that's fine as well. But we were going on outings for the first time, and we went to get pizza after a walk on the beach, right? The beach wasn't very attractive in a certain way. It was like there was a pier, and there was like a jetty, and there was a pretty rocky or kind of rocky and even dirty kind of beach there, and we walked barefooted on that, right? And then we went to get pizza because that was kind of dinner time, and it was really awkward at the table because I think she expected me to hit on her because it was like monumental that we'd arranged this outing, right? And I was pretty laid back because I had no strong inclinations, really. Like, I knew that it was an agenda to kind of have kind of some kind of engagement on an intimate level, but I didn't know what to do because I was completely nonplussed. Yeah, I remember her shaking. Like, she was really well dressed and her hair was beautiful, and I kind of loved that. But she was also shivering on her side of the table, and I didn't know what that was, why that was, and I just asked her, are you cold? And I don't know what she said next, really. Well, I do remember, but it wasn't kind of relevant. So she said that she said basically that she had a coat on, and yeah, so it was kind of awkward, but it was like so surreal because it was a moment that meant so much to me because of its awkwardness and significance in terms of where I've been and where we're going. So let's backtrack to 1997. Now, this was my last year in high school at Canberra Grammar School, and I was on student exchange. So I was being hosted by a Singaporean family in 97. And I was a very awkward person, so I was very hard to deal with, kind of inward looking and didn't talk very well. So my host Victor had a lot of problems with me and often got upset. And eventually, after a couple of days, several days or even a week, he became frustrated with dealing with me. But he had to. He was obliged to take care of me for those 2 weeks. And eventually he got his friend PJ to come in and talk to me. And we talked about music, which was the one thing that I really could talk about. And we had a decent conversation, and Victor was just so grateful to his friend PJ for saving him and allowing me to speak freely for the first time on that trip. And Victor also gave me a couple of CDs, which was very generous of him. One was of Vladimir Horowitz playing like really fast pieces on the piano, and I think another was the Symphony No. 9 by Beethoven. So great pieces, obviously, and it was great to get something for free, which is something that I really savoured because I was very frugal myself, and Singaporeans really are frugal as well, normally. But there was a moment in the last week, maybe even the last days, where I had, I think, borrowed Victor's black backpack, and I had it on my back, and we were outside walking towards, like, it might have been Tang's or, one of the big plazas on Orchard Road, and then this bird poop, came on, like, dropped onto my backpack, which was actually Victor's backpack, and just missed my head by like inches, and I didn't know. And Victor brought it to my attention and said, "Hey, I just want you to know there's something on your backpack there," and he was like indicating in a very subtle way that, in his own kind of way, that it might have well dropped on my head. But there was an element of luck. Like they believed religiously in some way that, Buddha or something, I don't know. The religion in Singapore is kind of multivariate and not quite definable. But yeah, they believed in luck. And I guess I was lucky on that day not to get the bird poop in my head, which would have made them laugh and etc. It was an indication of many good things which happened in that trip, which were the result of a huge amount of patriotic spirit, I guess, and just the sense of duty to the community that Singaporeans have. Now, I know that some people say that they're very money-oriented kind of society. I found them extremely loving and kind in many ways, which I didn't see in Australia. Okay, let's turn to the recent years. So there's this homeless girl who's she's quite chronically homeless, right? Now, she stayed in hotels at the expense of the government, like they've given her gratuities like that. I think she might have stayed with friends, she might have stayed with certain people, maybe her father, I don't know. But Sam she's like when she talks to you, it's like you've known her for like 15,000 years, and she's like treats you like a familiar. And so it's very propitious that something amazing will happen when you're with her. It's like she's conducive to that. So yeah, it's hard for me to think of anything amazingly outstanding because there's so many good things that happened between us. And I was really awkward, and she still didn't think about it that way. She was still like the familiar girl that she always wanted to be, and always her personality like that. And there was one moment in Woolworths where we bumped into each other, and I looked at what she was holding and I said noodles, and that made her and her boy companion laugh, and that was kind of like that was funny to me as well. But so many good things happen with her. Like, she's a lucky girl, but she doesn't know it. And at the same time, if she's poor, she spends on strange things. I've seen her with expensive things, and I don't know if she has like paid her rent or whatever, but she's probably irresponsible with her money, but she's just such a good person to speak with, and just genuine, just so genuine. And then my friend on Facebook, who I now call Ty, which is short for another longer name, right? But back in 2000, was it 2003 or 4? No, sorry, 2022 or 3. Sorry, I'm getting the years mixed up. So back in 2023 or so, I was at a vegan market, and I don't often go there, but she was. I saw her with her boyfriend. Like they were walking past, and she was dressed quite weirdly. I compare it to kind of gypsy, right? And I don't think I've ever seen her like that in photos and stuff. But she was dressed in as a gypsy or something, like in black, like flowingly in black, and she looked so prestigious, right? And I was just dressed in my normal stuff. I don't know what I was wearing, but I looked pretty sedate. I was probably leaning against a post or just half seated or something. And I could see her walking past with a boyfriend, and I was wondering, maybe she'll just ignore me. Maybe this is where she goes all the time, vegan markets, because I don't go there very often. Too out of the way for me. And eventually, because I was still standing there, she approached me from the front by herself, not with anybody else, right? And the first thing she said was, "Oh my God, Mark, you've lost weight." And I responded to her, and we had a fairly decent conversation. A bit nervous, a bit still, poised, pregnant with possibility, but not really, not over the top, and contained. I guess I was trying to look normal, but I was nervous. And yeah, eventually she just said, she kind of concluded with a few words, and she knew that I would continue correspondence with her through social media, which I often do. But it was so surreal. It was like it was in the darkness with a few lights there. And it was surreal because, okay, maybe because of her status, maybe because she's a little bit socialite, kind of exclusive. Like she's had various boyfriends and goes through them quite quickly. Yeah, it was immensely valuable to me to have that conversation. Like beyond her own values, right? And her own measure of what was valuable. But when we got back onto Facebook, social media, Facebook Messenger, the reference back to that conversation in real life was somewhat, I don't know, she expressed the word love, and I was kind of taken aback by that, and from there I was very awkward, and I didn't know how to resume the conversation online. So I guess that I blundered a few times, not in the emotional sense, just in the kind of just with a few things that I said. I'll give you an example. I might have mentioned Jesus, right, a few months after that, or I might have said something a bit awkward. I don't know. But she's never had a decent conversation with me since then. She's always been reserved because I think she fears that I will either hit on her or do something strange to her, and she doesn't give people a second chance, which is very common with young people, especially in the latest generations. They are like one fault. After you do one thing wrong to them, they will remember that and not give you another chance, which is pretty common. So yeah, we haven't really got back on board, and there's still that air of inquietus and nervousness between us. Now, I do have a few classified and strictly confidential, secret moments in my life, which I'm not going to reveal in this video. Maybe in the future, but for now, I'm going to say goodbye, and thank you for watching. Bye!